prepared statement from the Afro-American and other third world students on the occupation of New Africa House.
There was a time when many college campuses were teeming cauldrons of unrest and protest. In the minds of many, academic freedom had run amok. There were calls to end the war in Vietnam and fight a war against poverty, disease, and discrimination here in America. College leaders were called on to act affirmatively and increase black presence on their campuses. There was an increase, but there is still protest.
Personally, I'm tired of teaching white people how to treat me. Treat me like you would treat another person. That's how I feel. You know, I want to be treated like the same other person who paid their bill alongside me.
The American college campus is a wonderful place to be. It is idyllic, beautiful, congenial. However, many African American students complain bitterly about racism on the college campus. They talk about discrimination, and yes, in some instances, they talk about segregation on the college campus. This is a different story. This is the story of the experience of the African American student in the classroom. It's a story about terrorism. Terrorism on the mind.
I took a history course last semester, and when you're a freshman, more than often your schedule is made for you. And I went into this class, it was an 8:30 class, and I get in there and there's this person, this professor who's an older person, and all through the class, you know, she seemed okay, as okay, you know, at 8:30 in the morning a person can get. But she seemed all right, and then we started talking about it was the class U.S. history since the Reconstruction. So I knew we were going to touch on slavery and you know, go into what else black people had to do. She had nothing to say about any experiments or any inventions that black people have done or anything like that. Her big thing was, you know, we're going to talk about slavery today, and she'd look right in my face, and there was
the only black in the class?
No, there was 3 people of color in the class, and we kind of sat together, well, sort of. And she said, I don't want to offend anyone. Why do professors do that? Because the whole class turns and looks at you like, uh-oh, what are they going to do now? And my biggest problem was I had to do a paper. She told you what the paper was on. It was everyone had to do the same thing. I got the paper back, and it was not an acceptable grade. I felt as though I deserved a much better grade. Over the years, my writing skills have been excellent, and you know, I've had teachers tell me this. And so I went to her office and I asked her, you know, I don't understand how you came about this grade. Can we talk about this? She said, okay, fine. And the first thing that comes out of her mouth is, are you from the Boston school system? My first instinct was, no, I'm not. I'm from Worcester. I graduated from Southside Community School, which I'm very proud of. The reason I got so upset about that first comment was because there are a lot of negative connotations that go along with the Boston school system. And I felt as though because I was a person of color and I received a low grade, I automatically was from this low degrading school system. And then I said, no, you know, I'm from South High in Worcester. And she said, well, I don't know where you people come from, you just end up here.
Christine, what's been your experiences here at Framingham State?
Well, it started off pretty bad because of specific classes that I had and what type of person I was supposed to be in the classroom. Meaning,
what do you mean, what type of person?
Meaning that I was in the ID program, which basically is alternatives for individual development for students who have poorer grades and SAT scores, and to help them get adjusted to college life. And I was in courses that I basically was already equipped for, well over equipped for, and I was very uneasy, but it was you can tell the students in the room were labeled as certain types of students. And so the teacher had that personality towards, or reaction towards those students in that way. So it was just very uneasy, so I had to drop that class. But what I found was I was doing very well in an English class. Actually, I was going to have a paper submitted to the Onyx because of how well I wrote and spoke and expressed my views. But when it came down to a research paper on the essence of black identity, basically, and about the problems with white supremacy and things of that nature, I got an F on the research paper. Now, what I had to do, because of course I was upset, very upset. I'm from a background where my parents, friends, everyone around me, that's all they spoke about was their blackness. And when I confronted that to the professor, they're like, oh, you're from a Boston public school, what do you know? I had to literally, everything, I had references and everything, I had to tell them exactly how I got to this answer, how I got to see this view, what my ideology was. Certain phrases that I used that were in Latin, I went to Latin Academy, I had to take so many years of Latin, I had to tell them what they meant. Everything in my paper was depicted, and I had to prove that I knew what I was talking about.
What happened to your grade?
What happened, he said he would, well, the professor said he would look it over, but it didn't change. And from that, I stopped going to classes only for exams, and that's what happened.
Christine Allen, a graduating senior from Dorchester, received a D from her experience, but after some protest, it was changed to a B. Freshman Dawn Hayes made a more drastic decision because of her incident. Both of these incidents came to the attention of Barbara Holland, Director of Affirmative Action.
I guess what I hope will happen is that it can be a learning and a growing experience for them. I hope that the damage is the kind of damage that can be controlled.
What about the experience that Christine had? How can she not have suffered a scar from that experience in her biology class?
She has suffered a scar. What I think, and maybe I'm being idealistic here, is that she can heal that scar. You know, just as you get the scab on the wound, you don't want to keep picking at it. So if that scar can really, you know, that wound can really be healed in that way, then she'll pull herself together, she'll be a whole person, and she'll be able to move on with her career.
That's the white man rule, you know? This is a white society.
Because of her strong positions on affirmative action on campus, Holland has been the recipient of several intimidating racist phone calls.
So anyhow, what's this deal now? And what is this affirmative action? If they want their fucking rights, they want equal rights, and how are they considered equal rights when they're getting higher than we are? Of course I'm white. Nigger lover shit. Have a good fucking night. Oh, wait till we see you in the morning.
What those unidentified voices may not realize is that when the morning came, they had not achieved their goal. Holland says that since they didn't call her name, their target had to be the school's aggressive affirmative action policy. So instead of racial verbal terror, a new day dawned over the darkness of racism. What the caller should know, Holland says, is that Framingham State has adopted a strongly worded policy, a policy against racism. It may be hard to enforce, but it sends a strong return message to those callers, and yes, even to those professors who refuse to teach or understand black students.
What we're saying is people who act on their feelings about another group based on the group's color, and whether they attack them verbally, non-verbally, physically, in any way, we're going to make a statement, hopefully, that will tell them, you can't do this, okay? We're talking about prejudice against people who are of a different color, and how that prejudice can be translated into actually discriminating against these people. So that's what the policy is about, the discriminatory, but we also need to educate people about their prejudices. So I think the policy was twofold, the education about prejudice and then the discrimination piece.
It is very important to point out right now that this is not an investigation or indictment of Framingham State College or any other college mentioned in this report. This is an examination of the experiences of African American students as told from their perspective and what lessons can be taught from all of this. Holland says her strongest ally is the president of Framingham State, Paul Weller. Mr. President, what would you do if you knew that one of your faculty considered African American students intellectually inferior?
Oh, I'd be devastated, I think. Not that it couldn't happen, and not that it doesn't happen. I believe it does. Certainly, I know there are individuals among us that feel that way. Well, what would we do? We would have to, some way or another, go to that faculty member. And I would try to work through the department chairs. We would try, I think, to work through the department chair of that department, to try to work through maybe friends and colleagues to see if we couldn't build a better understanding and a better response to that set of circumstances.
Because I didn't hear you say you'd like to get rid of it.
Well, maybe in my heart that's what I would like to do, but in general my approach to those kinds of things is that people can be educated and they can be made to understand that they have a wrong perception and a wrong point of view and are seeing the situation wrongly. And in fact, that behavior can be changed.
I guess based on your answers, I better ask you a question point blank.
Shoot.
Is a racist welcome on your faculty?
Of course not. For sure not.
Okay.
Or any place else in the institution.
Because they call this adversarial intellectualism, and I'm sure that's allowed. But at the same point, when adversarial intellectualism sort of ascends to racism, I think that can be insidious, don't you?
Absolutely.
With the exception of President Weller, no white faculty member, staff, or administrator would talk with Say Brother about the racial problems in the classroom for this report. There are more than 7,800 African American students in the state college system. More than half of them are in two-year institutions. According to unofficial estimates, over 70% receive financial aid and less than one-third graduate. Unofficially, 9% finish the four-year schools and only 13% successfully completed two-year education. There are an estimated 300 complaints of racism in the classroom by students, but precise numbers are difficult to accurately determine because of the different way complaints are handled and records are accumulated and maintained. Once again, it is important to repeat, this report is looking at the experience of many African American students on our college campuses. This is not, repeat, not an indictment of any particular school.
I took this course, Introduction to Short
Gamal
Stories.
Lumumba Nkrumah is a 1989 graduate of Salem State College. He had several racial encounters in the classroom.
The name of the text, but I have it written down somewhere in notation on records. Anyway, we had 9 chapters to read, and I was scanning through the chapters, and basically in almost all 9, the word nigger was used repeatedly. I recall reading through one where a father was saying to his son, "Do you know what a nigger look like?" In the class when he was doing the material, I was very angry. I was drawing faces of a frown on my book, and I wanted to walk out the class, but I said to myself, no, don't walk out. You're going to give them the satisfaction. So I sat down for the remainder of the class, and after the class was finished, I went and I approached Dr. and I said to him, "Sir, I find the material offensive to me as an African and to my race." He said, "If it was written about Jews, you would have enjoyed it, would you?" I said, "No, sir." I said, "Anything that degrades any person, I'm opposed to." And basically, I recall in the first class we had, he gave an assignment, and he praised me for highlighting the significance of the material. I got a B for that, and in conclusion of the course, I got a C.
Lumumba recounted 5 instances where he approached his professor on perceived racist material and subsequently received a poor grade. Listen to his classroom story about the African origin of the warrior Hannibal.
So I said, Hannibal was a black man. And he said, "What book are you reading? Ripley, believe it or not?" I said, "No, I'm reading history books as you are." And he said, "Where do you get all these books?" I said, "I buy them." He said, you think that Africans are superior?" I said, "No." He said to me, "Whites are superior to blacks." I said, "I don't know where you get that nonsense from, because basically if you speak to any noted scholar, anthropologist, or anything of the sort like this, they'll tell you that no race is superior to any other.
Farnell Longus is a professor of social work and Afro-American studies at Salem State College. He acknowledges that prejudice does play a role in a professor's grading of a student's performance.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. That can happen too in the academic requirements in terms of giving grades for courses. That people's prejudice can influence how they act, how they behave, and how they think. Definitely. I won't deny that because, you know, I've seen it happen, and as a student and as also a worker, I've been, you know, victimized by that myself, so I know that that's the case.
Anytime a professor systematically, and I stress the word systematically, assumes that your essay is the work of someone else, just because your skin is black, your rights are being violated. Anytime faculty assumes they must treat you differently than any other student, your rights are being violated. And I stress that again, differently than any other students. We want to be treated as human beings and as students as any other student population on this campus. Anytime administrators systematically tell black-skinned students that they should get a job rather than pursue an education, their rights are being violated. Anytime administrators threaten to deny you admissions into Brandeis if you participate in protests, your rights are being violated. Anytime students say or write that our culture is, quote, unsophisticated, unquote, our rights are being violated.
Student perceptions of racism in the classroom are alive and well on some of our nationally known campuses. Witness a student protest meeting at Brandeis University.
Many of you here have heard us repeatedly assert that we are in pursuit of human rights. In essence, we are trying to ascertain how Brandeis's policies, if there are any, and there's only one, that's all we got, protect our civil rights under the Constitution of the United States.
At Smith College in Western Massachusetts, a prestigious women's institution, they have developed a new policy called A Design for Institutional Diversity.
I have to say that for me, I honestly don't see the effects, the benefits of the Smith design as of yet. It's very new. It's still very new. I suspect that if all goes as planned, you will see a notable difference in about 5 years. The classes, I guess, the numbers of people applying and numbers of people accepting reportedly have gone up. The classes, however, in terms of the number of black freshmen coming into Smith have remained about the same. There'll be about 13 or 14 black students graduating in my class out of a class of 750. When I came in, I think there were 24, 25 of us. Unfortunately, in spite of the Smith design, a lot of people, black students here, are very unhappy. They're leaving, and that concerns me because while I understand the adversity and the problems and the obstacles that they face here, I don't want racism and discomfort and neglect and negation to be the reason they have to leave.
I think it's important to say that racism affects everyone. And so it's true that white students are not typically, white students are not the targets of racism. But at the same time, they certainly are affected by it, and it affects their daily interactions. So a student who has internalized stereotypes about black people and then feels uncomfortable in the presence of a black person or finds difficulty in interacting. We live in a society which is increasingly multicultural. I mean, if you hear people frequently quote, for example, in California, that the so-called minorities are now the majority in California. If you look at if you look at our world as, increasingly a global village, 80% of the world's population is made up of what we here in the United States call minorities. So that if you are a person who feels uncomfortable or cannot relate in a effective way with people who are different from yourself, then you're going to be an ineffective person in life. I mean,
Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum teaches a course on racism at Smith College. She and other African-American professors, students, affirmative action officers, and many civic and political leaders across the nation are grappling with this subtle, deeply felt, non-touchable, yet unseen, perplexing predicament, racism in the classroom. The tools for handling this situation right now are dialogue, training, workshops, and visiting professorships. Maybe a policy against racism isn't such a bad idea.
We're trying to put together some programs. We've had a number of programs, and what we're trying to do is target the different audiences here. We have the faculty that we're trying to increase their awareness about incidents of racism, whatever. We've got to look at the administration, increasing their awareness about the issues, and also the student body. So I see it as a three-pronged approach through workshops. Other things that happen, for example, when we have Black History Month here on campus, that is certainly a way that we do educate people about Black people's role in history, you know, their rich heritage and so on and so forth. And whereas it may not be a specific workshop, but it certainly is a way to increase people's understanding of the Blacks' contribution to this country.
See you guys later.
Bye-bye.
There is a perceptible exodus of Black students from predominantly white colleges in this country. The former chancellor of the Board of Regents and now the president of the largest Black university in the country, Howard University, Dr. Franklin Jennifer, says that there is a real reason for this.
As we've seen an increase in the number of students who are attending predominantly Black institutions now, and when we ask those students who attend those institutions why they're transferring, they say they're transferring not because they've been victims of overt discrimination, but because they felt the subtle, violent, equally violent types of actions that hit them in areas that they cannot articulate very clearly.
You plan to stay here 3 more years?
I might not. I don't know.
What are you thinking?
It depends. I need to. Right now, I mean, I've actually started thinking about transferring to an all-Black university. But if I don't do that, I'll stay here.
Where would you transfer?
Howard University in Washington, D.C.
Arnita, you are a freshman here at Framingham State, and what's your future?
Well, I'm transferring to Morris Brown in Atlanta, Georgia.
Why?
I want to experience, you know, the Black culture. Here, we don't have that. We only have one organization, Culture in Effect. That's the only club we have for all Black people.
If people don't feel comfortable, then they can go off into the predominantly Black settings. But I really feel that in order to prepare yourself for the world, the business world, or whatever organization you go to after graduation, that it's very helpful for students to have this experience here on a predominantly white campus.
You don't think they can have an integrative experience at a predominantly Black campus?
Not in the same way that they would have here.
I think we have to be very careful when we talk about just this knee-jerk reaction to integrate colleges and universities because they happen to be white. They have Black students there, they have a threshold. Black students don't need an integrated education to be great students. What they need is a sensitive environment. And as those traditionally white colleges begin to develop that sensitive environment, I think it will be a natural flow that their numbers will rise above the so-called thresholds that they're also very, very concerned about.
Would you recommend Salem State for a Black student?
Oh, yes. Yes, I would definitely recommend Salem State for Black students.
But if they're going to experience this kind of insidious attack on their dignity, why would you recommend it?
Well, because Salem State is no different from any other institution in the American society. And I think other institutions in the American society operate the same way in regards to Black people. I think that if a student is able to understand that, you know, that the student can deal within that situation. If a student is not interested in having the interactions with people who would, you know, who would treat them less than they would treat themselves, you know, I would recommend a primary Black institution for them.
Well, let me add another dimension to this. I feel that there are some damaging things that can occur on predominantly Black campuses. There, unfortunately, are situations where Black people do not take the care and respect with each other that I think they should. And I think sometimes that it's what I call a Black-on-Black crime is sometimes more damaging than for a white person to kind of deny your existence.
Is it possible that there are racists here on the campus that you may not know about?
Oh, I think it's possible that, in fact, I know that it is true that racists exist in our society, and if they exist in our society, they certainly exist here on our campus. And it happens in many different ways, as you know much better than I. I guess I'm strongly struck by some of the overt things that we now kind of look at as more or less common, that I don't believe would have been common just a few years ago, let alone all of the sort of under-the-table things that
Strongly
happen.
struck. Are you surprised?
I'm surprised, yes, and frustrated. In my deeper moments, I suppose, kind of disappointed in the way things have gone.
It's a major problem for us. One of the things we're going to try to do is through a variety of work sessions, bringing in independent investigators and scholars to talk with faculty members and members of the institution to try to get them to come to grips with the kind of inherent racism that exists in our society and the ways and subtle ways in which they manifest that to students. Hopefully that will begin the process, but it's a long one, and I can't tell you I see any signs that it will be dissipated in the short term.